Hello, Greg. Herbert here from Craft. And before I start today's subject, I want to give a shout out to fellow YouTuber Boomstick345. When I'm not talking about anime or animation, one of my favorite things to do is read. I was told a while ago about this book series called Twilight. Let me tell you, I am sorry to say that I have wasted a good part of my life on these shit so-called novels. I have, and am embarrassed to say that I have unfortunately read all 4 of those ridiculous Twilight books, and absolutely hated them all. Admittedly, there were several parts that were entertaining, but they were few and far between, and were greatly overshadowed by the horrendous and downright shitty writing of Stephanie Meyer. So, I have decided that, since I am bored beyond almost all human measure, I will write my opinions in a very clear list, or at least I'll try. I might get carried away. Also, to any reading this, please understand that this is meant to be somewhat malicious, mostly because I enjoy it. So just try not to get all protective and offended and personal. It's meant to be personal. It's just my opinion. And some fact. A lot of fact. Meyer in vampires. Let's face it, Stephanie Meyer's vampires are fucking glamorized gamers. That's the only word I can think of for it. Yes, they have sharp teeth, venom, and strength, but the entire idea of a vampire was torn apart and reworked to fit little girls' fantasies. Dracula was a real vampire. Lestat was a real vampire. Alucard Helsing was a real vampire. Edward Cullen is a gay pretty boy poser, because maybe when she tried to describe just the appearance of said fruitcakes, I doubt it would have made it any farther. It makes sense that they'd be good-looking, so I'll give her that. But was it seriously her idea to make them look like they just took a bathe in glitter? The sunlight is supposed to kill them. Well, not kill them, because they're already supposed to be dead, but the equivalent of killing them. Vampires have always survived by drinking human blood, because they're dead and can't produce their own anymore. I'm no doctor, but I'm pretty sure animal blood doesn't mix well with the human circulatory system. That aside, though, the whole reason vampires were created was to scare the crap out of kids. That's likely the reason they're the undead who sleep in coffins and get burned to a crisp in the sunlight. Meyer took this idea and completely flipped it, which is why her vampires aren't vampires at all, but really old glitter people with strange dietary needs. Helsing was a cartoon and he at least kicked ass, and had a vampiric attitude. Even that quasi-fruitcake Lestat has more balls than Edward Cullen. These books are full of awful writing, but it still bugs me when I read a book that's gotten any attention whatsoever, and come across things like The Scene Pretty Nice in New Moon, page 339. I don't have the books with me, so I can't really go through and find many examples, but grammar and spelling errors seem to have bred in the text like a horrible plague. I'm pretty sure that I could have done a better job editing it, or anyone with more than a 6th grade education. Not as important, but somewhat irritating, are the many factual errors in the book. They're things you wouldn't even notice, but that are still just flat-out wrong. Examples. Bella says they're required to take 4 years of PE, but in actuality all Washington schools require only 3. When Edward is describing Carlyle's story to Bella, he says that in the 1600s he found a group of vampires living in the sewers of London, but sewers were not built under London until the late 1800s. These characters have no depth. You'd think 4 books would be enough to develop the handful of characters Meyer created, but apparently you'd be wrong. Bella is always just a self-conscious girl who can't go 2 pages without describing how perfect Edward is, and how much her life sucks without him. Edward is a perfect creature who does a heck of a lot of nothing except go out of his way to make things more complicated. The Cullen clan is all happy, and joy and perfection. Charlie's a father who doesn't want his girl to hate him. Jacob's a pubescent and angsty teen who is almost to the point of cutting himself most of the time, etc. There. I just saved you all a lot of reading. In addition to all of the characters she hasn't developed in the first 3.5 books, Meyer also feels that she can bring in about 20 brand new characters in the last 5 chapters of the book. That's all fine, because I feel about as much sympathy for any of these new characters as I did for the old ones, which is closer to I dropped my food sympathy than oh my friend could die sympathy. I faithfully and honestly read every page of every one of those books, and I got about as much plot out of it as Goodnight Moon. The first book alone is split up about like this. Bella's life sucks. 10 pages. Bella doesn't like Edward. 5 pages. Bella falls in love with Edward. 5 pages. Bella and Edward stare into each other's eyes. 400 pages. Do you see where I'm going here? Sudden random conflict, climax, and resolution. 10 pages. The second book is even easier to break up. Edward leaves. 5 pages. Bella's life sucks. 450 pages. Edward's back. 5 pages. Those were the only 3 words I could think of to describe the end of the series. Although, technically this would fall in the plot category, I feel like it is just so awful it earned its own bullet point. The first book has almost no plot, the second has absolutely no plot, and the third was pathetic. Needless to say, I wasn't particularly excited to read the fourth book, but I did anyway. This was the only book in the series that I felt was anywhere near worth reading. Admittedly, I was kind of excited when they come down to a large-scale battle between 2 vampire armies. I figured this was finally going somewhere. My only wish now is that I could go back and warn myself not to read the rest. In case you don't remember, it goes like this. Massive armies with leaders that want to kill each other are facing off. They're arguing. A badly developed character dies. More random characters are introduced. Tensions rise. And nothing. The entire thing just ends. The evil vampires depart in peace, to be dealt with later. The good army that was gathered disperses, with all of them feeling like it was a big waste of time, and all readers out there with any literary sense are fuming. Worst ending I've ever read. Ever. There is no exception to that. Happily ever after this kind of goes hand in hand with what I said above about the horrid ending. Stephanie Meyer is a poor author, but beyond that, she's a gutless author. As much as I hate the Harry Potter books, at least J.K. Rowling didn't feel bad about killing off a few characters. But in Meyer's books, not a single major character dies. Not one. Not one. Everyone that dies is someone you knew was going to have to die anyway. Meyer was scared to do what was necessary to make this a decent book, not what a literary whore. Worse was the crappy-ass movie they made of it. It just proved my worst fears, that this goddamned franchise was nothing more than eye candy for unintelligent juvenile young women to masturbate to. Bella Swan and Edward Cullen look like they belong on the cover of a glamour magazine, of course the kind of fansluts who use this book to say to people that they read a book. Fucking losers. Bella Swan and Edward Cullen look like they belong on the cover of a glamour magazine, of course. The writing sucked worse than the book, and even worse they give more attention to that man-slit Michelin character, that god-awful Jacob Black. I mean, he has to be the worst character ever developed in literary history. And they get this slug-headed boy Toy Taylor Lautner to play him. As if Robert Pattinson as Edward was not enough whack fodder for the girls to squill over. They should have bypassed the big screen and went to straight DVD or download and called the movie Twilight. That probably would have really got the sluts excited. Ugh. I really want to go to these fangirls' homes and whack them across the head with a copy of Anna Karenina or Chekhov or Shakespeare and show them what a real book is. Fucking fansluts. In closing, I'll leave you with the sane words of a real writer, living horror legend Stephen King, who said both Rowling and Meyer, they're speaking directly to young people. The real difference is that Jo Rowling is a terrific writer and Stephanie Meyer can't write worth a darn. She's not very good. People are attracted by the stories, by the pace, and in the case of Stephanie Meyer, it's very clear that she's writing to a whole generation of girls and opening up kind of a safe joining of love and sex in those books. It's exciting and it's thrilling, and it's not particularly threatening, because it's not overtly sexual. He further explains, a lot of the physical side of it is conveyed in things like, the vampire will touch her forearm, or run a hand over skin, and she just flushes all hot and cold. And for girls, that's a shorthand for all the feelings that they're not ready to deal with yet. I'll take it one notch further on Stephen's comment. Stephanie Meyer can't write for fucking shit. Fuck Twilight, fuck the books, fuck the movie. Fuck Edward, Bella and that repulsive Jacob Black, and to all those fansluts out there. Fuck you too. I don't know why I get so worked up over this shit. Oh well, let's get to better. This ranting was a public service message for your own good. Brought to you by your friends at Craft.